Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Living Analog Sound Lab. I'm Wyatt Foley. Have you ever wondered why certain records in your collection just have more life and more slam and more breath than others? There's a very high probability that this man's initials are etched into the vinyl. I'm talking about the legendary Kevin Gray. In the world of high-end audio, we have our icons. If Chad Kassem is the high priest of vinyl and Bernie Grundman is the grandmaster of the lathe, then Kevin Gray is the oracle of the living signal. He is a man who looks past the marketing hype to focus purely on the technical integrity of the analog chain. Today, we're diving into 4 essential insights from a recent deep dive with Kevin, where he pulls back the curtain on the physics of the cutting room. We're going to talk about the hidden digital step in modern mastering and why some of your favorite original pressings might actually be holding the music back. Let's hear from Kevin and what he has to say about the reality of half-speed mastering.
I'm not a fan of half-speed mastering. I think it's more of a detriment than a positive. The problem is that you're cutting all the bass in half. So, you're losing an octave on the bottom. And on the top end, a lot of corrective measures have to be taken in cutting to correct for things like vocal sibilance or really excessive cymbals and that sort of thing. And none of the devices that control that work with a half-speed signal because it's all half the frequency, so what would be an 8K cymbal is now a 4K cymbal and it won't respond to it. Now, that can be corrected digitally. And so I have gone on record as saying, if you're going to cut half speed, it almost has to be from digital for it to really come out decent at all, in my opinion. I used to hear vocal sibilance and stuff on the half speed masters, and it drove me up the wall.
That's a major reality check for the half-speed crowd, but the real controversy lies in the signal path itself. Kevin explains how the lack of a physical preview head on a tape deck forces most modern engineers to use digital delay just to communicate with the cutting lathe.
I'm talking about analog versus digital delay.
Okay.
I know that you guys don't have digital delay, but in the past, that was shocking. We did have that. And I mean, well, you tell us a little bit about it. I don't want to spoil anything.
Oh, no. It's a very good point, and I'm happy to, put my 2 cents worth in, as we say. Let's see, how do I start? Okay, back when the phonograph record went away, the first time, like 1990, I guess, a lot of people built mastering consoles for doing digital, and they didn't put the provision in to have a program chain and a preview chain. Preview being what feeds a computer in the cutting lathe that adjusts the groove spacing. When the music's loud, it spreads the grooves farther apart. When the music gets quiet, it closes them down, allows you to get more time or more volume or both on the record. Okay, when vinyl started to come back in again in the mid 90s and particularly in the mid 2000s, people had all these consoles that didn't have preview, so they would have to take a tape machine that didn't have a preview head on it and run it through a digital delay, and you would use the signal off the tape to feed the computer and the delayed signal to feed the cutting electronics in the cutting head. And it's basically like you might as well be doing it from a digital file because it has the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're doing the brick wall filtering and the reconstruction filter and all of that stuff, in the digital delay. So yeah, and people said, well, wouldn't there be less wow and flutter? And it's like having the tape go around one more or 2 more loops. That I don't see, and I've made the measurements. It doesn't increase wow and flutter. So. Yeah, my system's all analog, and I don't go through any digital delays. And the only time I ever use a digital delay is if I'm mastering from a CD.
Obviously. So you can confirm that the digital delay is going on the record when used, when adopted.
Absolutely. Yeah, the signal's going through
Because
it.
people say no, that's not true, and I don't know how to
It
say
is
this
true.
anymore.
This is the heart of the living signal. While many chase clinical accuracy, Kevin's custom built transformerless tube system is designed for a specific harmonic sweetness and low end slam that solid state gear often leaves behind.
So it's a very different sound when you consider the whole chain. I haven't really broken it down too much into pieces, if you know what I mean, because I look at the whole thing as a whole with the idea of sort of creating a vintage sound with modern music. That was the concept. Um, and it's kind of hard to quantify what changes the sound where in terms of, it's well, you probably are aware that in 2020, just kind of for a lark, I cut the War Greatest Hits when it came in with my tube
Hmm.
cutting electronics only. So it was just the cutting rack with the power amplifiers and the RAA and all of that. Um, just to see how it would sound. And I was thrilled with the way it sounded. And we put it out there and didn't say anything to anybody. It was for Record
Aha.
Store Day 2020. And about 2 years later, I let it drop that, by the way, that was cut with my tube rig because my record hadn't even been released yet. So people were saying, well, we're really anxious to hear how your system sounds. I said, well, if you want to hear the disc cutting part of it, you can buy this
It's
record.
already there.
And suddenly it sold out. So
I
I guess
bet.
there was a lot of interest. But, I would say
Absolutely.
that you know, it's such a cliche, but there is a little bit of a warmer sound to tubes. And it's not just that they glow and put off heat. I've heard that joke. But
I bet.
the top end's a little sweet. The bottom end has got a lot of slam to it, but it's not quite the same as my Class A solid state system. I'm happy to go on record and say I actually think my Class A solid state system is a little more accurate in terms of giving you exactly what's on the tape. But I love the sound of the tube system. And I think and that's why I'm basically saving it for my projects. I'm not using it for other people's projects. And I'm not going to be doing reissues or anything like that. So, or at least not planning to. Uh, People have asked me, but
Finally, we address the original pressing's obsession. The Oracle reveals that the legendary engineers of the past were often forced to compromise their masters, rolling off the bass and treble simply because the average consumer turntable of the era couldn't track the full energy of the tape.
Thing I wanted to ask, and here you have to be honest because you're part of it.
I'll be honest.
See, since we are living what I called a new analog age, the current reissues, do you think they are better than the originals? Clearly not in every case, but in most cases, what do you think?
Yes, I would have to say they are. I'm not saying all of them, but I can name the guys, Bernie Grundman, um, Ryan Smith, and myself. And who am I leaving out? There's a couple of other people that are doing some very, very good work on audiophile releases, and yeah, I think they blow the originals away.
Yeah, because from
I mean,
what
for
I
one thing, the
understand,
equipment has improved. The equipment is better than it was in those
exactly.
days, and I know my system is because it was custom built. It's Class A solid state transformerless from tape head to cutter head, and I don't think anybody else has that. But there are a lot of systems that have been really tweaked up to sound a lot better than the old systems back in the '70s, and and if you get an engineer who's not too heavy-handed or knows how to properly twist the knobs, I think you're going to wind up with a release that sounds better than the original. Oh,
Exactly.
Chris
Also,
Chris Bellman, forgot Chris. He does
yeah,
great work
true.
too. He's a friend,
No,
personal friend.
no, also because, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, back in the days, let's say 60s, 70s, for example, jazz recordings, uh, they had to cut off a lot of frequencies because people had, let's say, crappy playback systems.
Exactly.
So,
That's exactly
so
right.
that's also, now we're benefiting all this technology and we can put back a lot of the missing spectrum.
Right. That was probably over by the late 60s, though. But yeah,
Okay.
you in the 50s for sure. There were heavy
In the
limitations
50s. Okay.
on what you could put on the record and not have it skip or distort or, in playback.
What Kevin Gray is essentially doing is liberating the music that has been trapped on those master tapes for decades. He's proving that the living analog isn't just about nostalgia. It's about using the best possible signal path to finally hear the full truth of the performance. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys joining the lab today. Let me know your thoughts on this. And definitely hit that like and subscribe button. And aloha from Maui.